Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walahu amma ba'd. After praising Allah and sending the salah and salam upon His messenger and saying amma ba'd, this is the evening preceding the 19th of Jumada Thaniya, 1440. And we are gathering together at this time for our 13th, is that right? 13th lesson in study of Al-Muqaddimah Al-Ajrumiyyah. A couple of questions here for you before we begin. In lesson number 12, there's a single rule. What's the single rule in lesson number 12? The alif is تكون الألف علامة للرفع في تثنية الأسماء خاصة. That's the rule. The alif, in only one occasion, is a sign of something being marfoo'. Not in any nouns. Only in verbs, right? No, not in any verbs. Only in nouns. And not in just any noun, a certain kind of noun. Dual plural nouns. And male or female doesn't matter here. Muslim, Muslimani, Muslimatun, Muslimatani. So then that's what we studied. We did a lot of work on that. And so one quick question in i'rab goes to Sayyid Ikram. You ready? You represent everyone with this answer. Seek Allah's assistance. Ja'a musafirani. Two musafirs came, right? A'rib musafirani. Marfoo', nice. Al-alif. Alamatu raf'ihi al-alif. As simple as that is, it's correct and it's good and it's sufficient for us. Let's begin lesson 13 then. Or one other question that is a bit of it can be a challenge sometimes. Is every noun that ends with alif noon a dual plural? Give me an example of a noun that ends with alif noon and looks like a dual plural, but it's only a mufrad. Adhan. Oh, you brought a new one, mashallah, the adhan. And you said, Ar-Rahman, yeah? Shaitan, Ghadban, Altshan, like that. Jo'an. He brought the exclusive one, mashallah, Adhan, nice. Now, lesson 13. When a noon indicates the marfu' case, look on page 21, lesson number 13, barakallahu fikum. وَأَمَّا النُّونُ قال ابن آجرُّم رحمه الله تعالى وأما النون. As for the noon, فتكون علامة للرفع في الفعل المضارع. It is a sign of something being marfu' in الفعل المضارع, in the present tense verbs. إذا اتصل به. We have three kinds of verbs. Not every فعل مضارع, but إذا اتصل به ضمير تثنية. If it has a ضمير for two people doing that verb. أو ضمير جمع. Or it has the waw al-jama'a in it. It has a waw for the group of people. Or أو ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة. Or it's got the dhamir for the female being addressed. Now to open that up, there are essentially 5 verbs that come in these 3 categories. And it works like this. The first one, let's review. إذا اتصل به ضمير تثنية. Who knows of an example of a fi'l mudari', present tense verb, that has the alif of ithnain in it? What is it, Ya Ibrahim? Yajlisani. Nice. Yajlisani. Now, is that alif the sign of it being marfu'? Remember what we said yesterday. Remember, the alif is a sign for something being marfu' in only one case. And it's got nothing to do with verbs at all. It's only tathniyatul asma'i khassa. Only dual plural nouns. So then when you say yajlisani, you've got a verb. Present tense, you've got a fi'l mudari'. You've got an alif in there, and you've got a noon too. Which one is the sign of it being marfu'? The noon. So what you're saying then is, if it's not marfu', the noon should either be something else or be taken away. Something happens to that noon. Like the alif when we said Muslimani, and then we say Ra'aytu Muslimaini, and the alif is lost. The alif is a sign for it being marfu'. So when it's the sign of the rafa', That means if it's not marfu', you don't see the sign. So now when we say noon, this is what we're talking about in lesson 13. The noon is a sign of a word being marfu' in present tense verbs only, with 3 specific incidents. When there is dhamir tathniya, which essentially means aliful ithnaini, the alif that's for 2 people. Now it comes in 2 different ways. It comes bil ghaibi wa bil mukhatabi. It comes in the 3rd person and it comes in the 2nd person. Meaning it comes in the descriptions of other people that aren't here and we're talking about them. Yajlisani. Homa, those 2 guys that I'm talking about. I'm not talking to them and I'm not one of them. So they're 3rd person to me in English. We say in Arabic, ghaib. So yajlisani. And I can talk directly to 2 people. And what happens to the ya from yajlisani? Becomes a ta. And I say, antuma tajlisani. Same thing, because in both cases we have dhamir at-tathniya. We have the dhamir, the alif al-ithnain. We have the alif that stands for 2. So whether it's yajlisani or tajlisani, the noon is the sign of it being marfu'a. That means if we bring some kind of harf, some kind of jazim or nasib, some kind of word that takes it away from its marfu'a form. Do you know one like the ones that we've talked about already? What do you put in front of a fi'l mudari if you want to change it from being marfu'a? Let's use 2 prepositions or 2 harfs that start with a lam, and they're very similar. Let's use lam and len. All right? And let's start with len with the noon, len. And it's a negation for the future. So len yajlisa, we're done. Take the noon off. Because now len is harf nasib. Len makes the verb mansub. It's no longer marfu'a. Since it's not marfu'a, the sign of rafa has to be gone. The sign of it being marfu'a, which is the noon, cannot be there. So now, len yadhabani. No, len yadhaba. Keep the alif, but get rid of the noon. We'll talk about that later, the i'rab of that, but we just want to know at this stage, if it doesn't have the noon, it's not marfu'a. Now that case is mansub. The way you know it's mansub is by hadf an-noon, by the deletion of the noon. That's later though. Let's use the word lam in front of the same verb, yajlisani. Let's use lam, which is a negation of the past. Len is a negation of the future. They shall not sit. These 2 shall not sit. Let's say they didn't sit in the past. Yeah, yajlisani, they're sitting now. Lam, they did not sit. Lam yajlis, what do we say? Lam yajlisa, same thing, the exact same thing. Mansub and majzoom look the same here. So it's yajlisani when it's marfu', and when it's mansub or majzoom, yajlisa, the noon is taken away. Now here it's a bit different from what we've studied so far. So far, usually mansub and majzoom would have different signs. Like jalasa, yajlisu. Yajlisu, the dhamma is there. The sign of it being marfu is the dhamma. Then we said, lan yajlis. We put a fatha on the scene. Lan yajlisa. And then when it was majzoom, we put a sukoon on the scene. Lam yajlis. So we had a different way that each case showed up on the verb. Now all of a sudden, it's either marfu or not. It's either put a noon on it, it's marfu, or it's something else, and it's all shared after that. Now, mind you, that's whether we're talking about 2 people absent or 2 people directly in front of us and we're talking to them. So, antuma tajlisani, the 2 of you guys are sitting. If I want to negate the 2 of you sitting in the future, I say the same thing like lan yajlisa. I just make the harf al-mudari' change from ya to ta. And I say lan tajlisa antuma. The 2 of you shall not sit. Lan tajlisa. And what about lam? Same thing. Lam tajlisa. Whether it's majzoom because of lam or whether it's mansub because of len with a noon. In both cases, it doesn't have a noon. What we're looking at today is marfu'. So it has a noon when it's marfu'. If it doesn't have a noon, it's not marfu'. And really, I don't care what it is right now. Whether it's mansoob or majzoom, that's not my focus. I want to know if it's marfu' or not. That's all. So yajlisani. Now, that's one out of three categories. إِذَا اتصل به ضمير تثنية. The second one is أو ضمير جمع, or the pronoun that shows that it's plural. And what's meant here is the waw. Waw al-jama'a. The waw that represents a group of people. And here the jam is three or more. Not the dual plural, but the group. The jam', which is three or more. And so that comes just like the muthanna. We're talking to two people or about two people. Same thing with the jam'. I can talk to a group of people directly and about a group of people in their absence. In both cases, the noon goes away when I use the verb. Give me a verb, a different verb, not yajlisani, and change it to what we would use for three or more people. What would you say, Sultan? What is it? Yadhabuna. Let's make it marfu' and start with fi'l mudari' marfu'. Yadhabuna. We've got that noon there. Yadhabuna. So yadhabuna, is that what you say talking to a group of people, telling them that they're going somewhere? Or is that what you say talking about a group of people that they are going somewhere? Bilghaib. Bilghaib. Yadhabuna. Those people, they're going. And I'm talking to someone else. Yadhabuna. All right, and if I want to talk directly to the group of people, tadhhabuna. Just playing with the ya versus the ta. That's all. Since we're playing with the harf al-mudari', can I put an alif on there? Because the haruf al-mudari' are what? Four. The ya and the ta. Can I try putting a hamza on there? They're together in the word anaytu. Anaytu, right? Yeah. Hamza, noon, ya, ta. These haruf al-mudari'. Can I say adhabuna? No, because adhab is always mufrad. Ana, adhab. Right? But what about, noon, for what? For nahnu. Nadhabuna? There's never a waw. The noon itself indicates plurality. So when we put this waw al-jama'a, it only comes with a ya or a ta. Ya for the ghaib, ta for mukhatab. So then, yadhabuna, ha'ula'i yadhabun. Let's say they're about to go. Or they're not going to go, sorry. Len, what do you say, Abdul Samad? Yadhabuna, put a len in front of it. Len, take off the noon at the end. That's all you got to do. Yadhabu. Len yadhabu. It's not marfu', so it can't have the noon, which is the sign of it being marfu'. Len yadhabu. And in handwriting, we put an alif there where the noon was. We don't pronounce that alif, but there's an alif. And you see it in the mushaf with a sukoon on top of it. Yeah? That alif is just to show the noon is deleted. Tayyib, it's not to be pronounced. So, len yadhabu. Just like when it was yadhabani, len yadhaba, take the noon off. Yadhabuna, len yadhabu, take the noon off. Yeah? And then what do we do with lem? With the meme? Same thing. Lem yadhabu. Now if I'm talking to the group, tadhabuna, len tadhabu, just take the noon off. And if I'm talking to a group of people and I want to tell them they didn't go in the past, lam tadhabu. Lam with a meme. Lam. That's a negation for the past. You did not go. Lam tadhabu. Lan tadhabu. You shall not go. Yeah. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. Look at that in Surah Al-Baqarah. تَفْعَلُونَ شَيْئًا. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. That's the challenge of bringing something like the Quran. Then فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. If you haven't been able to do it yet, وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. Allah tells them, you shall not. A sensible person who's still a disbeliever but he knows Allah is al-haq, al-mubin, he says, then I give up trying because Allah has already informed me that I shall not be able to come with something like the Quran. So, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا, since you haven't been able to do it, وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا, and you shall not do it, فَاتَّقُوا النَّارِ. So then fear the fire. Simple command to mankind. Why don't they pay attention? Allahu Akbar. Now we've got 4 out of the 5 verbs. We're calling these verbs, when we get to all 5 of them, we're going to call the group of them The 5 verbs. How would we say that in Arabic? Al-af'al al-khamsa. Nice. There's another nickname for all of these 5, and we've only got 4 so far. There's another nickname, not the af'al khamsa, but the al-amthilatul khamsa. They're also called al-amthila, the 5 examples. The reason why they're called amthila is because they're scales. They're not actual words. Yajlisuna, yaqra'una, yaktubuna, yadhhabuna. It's a scale. Any verb you bring, and it comes with that waw noon. So it's not really a kalima, it's a scale. And anything you put on that scale has the same ruling. Versus al-asma'ul khamsa, we really mean 5 words and no other words. Abuka, what are they? Abuka, wa akhuka, wa hamuki, wa fuka, wa dhu malin. These are asma' khamsa. These are 5 nouns that have a certain way of i'rab. And we don't mean the scale. We mean those 5 words. So it's befitting that we call them al-asma'ul khamsa. Some of the nuhat, some of the scholars of grammar, they said about al-af'alul khamsa, they called them al-amthilatul khamsa, the 5 examples. Because why? It's not 5 verbs. It's not just yaf'alun and taf'alun. It's any verb that comes with that scale. So they're called al-af'alul khamsa or al-amthilatul khamsa. And we've got 4 of them so far. What are those 4? Yeah, what are the 4 that we have so far? With the noon as the sign of being marfu'. Think tathniya first. Give me 2 for tathniya. Yaj, harf mudari'. These are af'al mudari'ah, of course. Yajlisani, and talk to them. Tajlisani. Now go 3 or more. Same idea. Yajlisuna or yadhhabuna, any verb. Tadhhabuna, tajlisuna. So that's 4 out of 5. What's this 5th one? It's what the author mentions when he says, أو ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة, or the ضمير of the female being addressed. What does that mean, huh? How do you talk to a woman using a fi'l mudari'? You say tajlisina, you're sitting down. Tajlisina, add a ya and a noon. So when you want to tell her, you shall not sit, lan tajlisi. You're just taking the noon off, not the ya. It's tajlisina with a ya and a noon. That's the fi'l mudari', marfoo'. When you want to make it mansub, lan tajlisi. Keep the full ya on there, and you're only removing the noon. Lan tajlisi. Don't say lan tajlis. Say lan tajlisi. Use the full ya there. And then what about lam with a meme? The same thing. Lam tajlisi. Now, is there a version of the ghaib here? And remember, the tathniya is for both mukhatab and ghaib. That's 2 out of the 5. The jamma is for mukhatab and ghaib. That's 3 and 4. So now, al-mukhataba, the female you're talking to. You can't have a mukhataba ghaiba. She's mukhataba. You're talking to her only. So it's specific to the female you're talking to, not about the female you're talking about. How do we talk about a female? Tajlisu. And so that's considered what? Fi'l mudari' mufrad. It follows the rules of yurfa' bil dhamma, yunsabu bi fatha, yujzamu bis sukun, like that. We don't have to go into the noon being assigned. There's no noon at the end. There's no extra letter. There's nothing there to deal with. Tayyib, so now we have tajlisina. Tajlisina for the female, talking to a woman. Tajlisina. And I say, lan tajlisi wa lam tajlisi. You shall not sit and you did not sit. That's for when you're talking to anti. You're talking to you, female. I will mention that something that could be adjusted here in the text, an unnecessary word in the text of Al-Ajrumiyyah that could be removed and the meaning would remain completely intact. And it is the word al-mu'annatha. Dhamir al-mu'annatha al-mukhataba. We don't need the word mu'annatha here. We could say, O dhamiru al-mukhataba. Because the word mukhataba has a ta marbuta at the end. That means it's mu'annatha. So we don't actually need the word mu'annatha here. And many of the scholars of grammar, when they're talking about this dhamir, they say dhamir al-mukhataba. That's all they call it. They don't say ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة. As soon as you put the ta marbuta on the mukhatab, mukhatabah, that means it's feminine. You don't have to repeat and say mu'annatha. It's included in the meaning of the ta marbuta if you're saying ضمير mukhataba. That's just for the sake of remembering that in language, خير الكلام ما قل ودل. The best speech is that which has the fewest words and the biggest impact and meaning. So if you can accomplish the same thing with 3 words that someone else can accomplish with 4 words, then فَأَنْتَ أَفْصَحْ, then you are better in eloquence. You have used less words to accomplish the same meaning. Now that's a rule in language. That's actually with all languages. In the uqala, with the people of intellect, that when you can speak with 5 or 10 words and convey a meaning that other people can only convey with 20 or 30 words, then فَأَنْتَ بَلِيغ, you are a person of eloquence. You know how to speak. As a person who doesn't know how to speak or use word choices or whatever, he needs to spend a lot of words to get a simple idea across. But part of what we're learning here, in our language studies, is the effective use of language. So we see here actually a point of criticism against the text. We could actually have أو ضمير المخاطبة, or the damir of the mukhataba, which must be feminine because it has a ta marbuta, and there's no need for the word mu'annatha. Don't scratch it. It's a matan. احفظ المتن كما هو. Memorize the matan, right? Out of respect for the text. You love the text, and you memorize it as is. And you just have a point. As our ulama teach us. We memorize the mutun, and then if we have some criticism of the matan, we know that. We're ready to explain it with that criticism. But we don't change the matan. We don't say, قال ibn Ajrum, Ibn Ajrum said, and then I have modified it. I have to bring his speech when I quote him. And so we're trying to memorize the actual matan as well. And this light was turned on for me by Sheikh Muqbil ibn Hadi al-Wadi al-Yamani. I sat with him in Mecca in the year 1421, I believe, or 1420. And he asked us, and I was a new student, relatively new, he asked us, ما تعريف البيقوني للمرسل? What's the definition given to the mursal hadith by al-Bayquni in the Bayquniya poem? I didn't know it at that time. I was a new student. One of my classmates answered, وَالْمُرْسَلُ مِنْهُ الصَّحَابِي يُسَقَطْ. Right? And the mursal is the chain which has the sahabi dropped out of the chain. And so the shaykh said, أحسنت. هل البيت صحيح? He said, very well done. Is that line correct? And this is the first time I heard that kind of discussion. Wait a minute. We're memorizing the meta. We're not nuqad. We're not critics. We're not here to say this is good or bad. We just memorize the text. The shaykh said, is that correct? And the student I was with, he said, لا ليس بصحيح. ليس على إطلاقه. It's not correct with that generalization. The shaykh was impressed. He said, لماذا? He said, why? He said, لو علمنا أن الصحابي هو الذي سقط لكان الإسناد صحيحا. If we knew that the tabi'i actually eliminated mention of only the sahabi, and that's all it is, then it doesn't matter what sahabi he knocked out. The chain is connected and it's authentic, and we don't care who's not mentioned. But it's the possibility of a tabi'i narrating from another tabi'i. Right? So then he said, Sahih al-Bayt. Sheikh Muqbil said, Sahih. Correct the Bayt. Meaning, now we're looking at, you need some skills now to hang out in this conversation. Memorize the text and be critical of it, and when it's not right, fix it. And I was impressed with one of my classmates. He said, وَالْمُرْسَلُ مِنْ بَعْدِ التَّابِعِي سَقَطْ. He said, the mursal hadith is the one that has a break after the tabi'i. And you don't know who's after the tabi'i. Anyway, little anecdote, personal anecdote there. رحمه الله تعالى رحمة واسعة كان مربيا الله أكبر عجيبا. Sheikh Muqbil was a very, very amazing teacher. How can I say it? May Allah have mercy on him. He's actually, for me, for that occasion right there is the time when the light of criticism was sort of turned on for me. Like, you don't just memorize things, you actually look at it carefully, and you might be a critic of it. You might be able to say, no, that's not correct. Walhamdulillah. So then, that's how we're getting to where we are now here. أو ضمير المخاطبة is sufficient. أو ضمير المؤنثة المخاطبة is a ziyada. One more word which doesn't bring any additional meaning, better left off. قال تعالى, Allah Ta'ala has said, قالوا إن هذان لساحران. They said, I quoted to you this verse yesterday. These are but two sahirs, لساحران. ساحران. أعرب ساحران. يا حنيف. Remember yesterday's lesson. ساحران. No. Two sahirs, two magicians. They're referring to Moosa and Harun. Ismun. Marfoo'. Nice. علامة رفعه الألف. اسم مرفوع. ساحران. Yeah. يريدان. Yurid, from the verb yurid. Huwa yurid, he wants to do something. Yuridani. A'rib. Who's ready to make i'rab of yuridani? Go ahead, Ibrahim. فعل مضارع. Nice. مرفوع. Nice. النون. Very well done, Ibrahim. وعلامة رفعه النون. Nice. Because if it wasn't marfu', what would it be? Yuridani. What would yuridani be if it was not marfu'? Take off the noon, it would be what? Tell me what it is. Yurida. Leave the alif totally. Yurida. The alif is for ithnain. You have to leave that alif there. Yurida. But don't put the noon on it. Remember, the noon is the sign of marfu'. So when you're saying it's not marfu', only take off the noon. Don't take the alif off too. Don't be a butcher. Take it easy. أن يخرجاكم. يريدان أن يخرجاكم. Then the verb here is يخرجوا. يخرجوا, to take you out. يخرجاكم. The two of them want to take you out. يخرجا. There's a verb. You know what that is, Sultan? يخرجا. أعرب. فعل or اسم? فعل. ماضي مضارع أمر. Which one? مضارع. فعل مضارع. What's your case first before you talk about your alama? What is it? مرفوع, منسوب, or مجزوم? It's مرفوع, are you sure? يخرجا with no noon. Not يخرجانكم. No, يخرجاكم. The noon missing. How about if you just say at this stage, it's not marfu'? We'll figure out what it is later. Right now, we just want to know, is it marfu' or not? The noon is gone. It's not yukhrijanikum, but here it's yukhrijakum. And we'll learn later, it's because of the an. An is a harf nasib. وَيَذْهَبَا. Here we have يَذْهَبَا with an alif. The alif is for Moosa and Harun. وَيَذْهَبَا بِطَرِيقَتِكُمُ الْمُثْلَى. ويذهب. What do you say, يا جبريل? فعل مضارع. Is it مرفوع? يذهبا. What would it be if it was مرفوع? يذهباني. Okay, it would be يذهباني if it was مرفوع. Since the noon is gone, it's not مرفوع. The job right now is not to really identify what's the case because we haven't learned that yet. But we know it's not marfu' because there's no noon. It needs a noon because it's a fi'l mudari' for the muthanna. It's got alif al-ithnain, dhamir al-tathniya. So it has to have a noon if it's marfu'. Yadhhaba with no noon is not marfu'. Barakallahu feekum. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Don't forget to take your papers here.